moving to part 4 of our Exodus series. It's called Here Am I. I think I got a little title slide for the Exodus series next or something like it. Made this picture the other day, and I couldn't tell if it was sacrilegious or not, but I at least thought it was kind of funny. You know, look at Moses down there in the front. Somebody said to me, "Isn't he the guy that doesn't get to go into the promised land?" I was like, I'm just going to try to avoid striking any rocks between now and then. Off into the unknown, baby. I was trying to write this series about the, spiritual, symbolic, inner realities expressed in the Exodus narrative. And then I found out we were going to have to move out of the theaters, a couple of weeks before I was launching the series. And I thought, sweet irony. So changed the tagline from inner transformation to also include outer movement, which is probably a more holistic look at the story anyway. So this is part 4. I'm going to begin with a little poem and a story from the Desert Mothers and Fathers. So next slide there. Oh, I got to tell you guys, I just had the best couple of weeks finding art of Moses in the burning bush. I mean, there have been some far out, somehow widely accepted artistic renderings of whatever that mystical moment was. So, buckle up. I'm going to bring some to us here. I heard the slides aren't working online, so I'd just like to both say thank you for watching online, and also you're kind of missing it. You should come next Sunday. Is that too much pressure? Kind of. All right. Sorry, I was laying it on thick there. I try not to do the expectation thing. Anyway, okay, let's stay on note here. All right, this is a poem. Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush is afire with God, but only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit round it and pluck blackberries, daub their natural faces, unaware. Abba Lot went to Abba Joseph and said to him, "Abba, as far as I can, I say my little office, I fast a little, I pray and meditate. I live in peace as far as I can. I purify my thoughts. What else can I do?" Then the old man stood up and stretched his hands toward heaven. His fingers became like 10 lamps of fire, and he said to him, "If you will, you can become all flame." So the Exodus story is the central myth of the Hebrew people, which means it's the meaning-making matrix for their entire cultural understanding of reality, and it's also shaped a lot of the world. It's kind of wild. This just little tribe, random collection of people. Somehow their story is passed down through. Like, think about how many other tribes around the same size as Israel have come and gone and come and gone and come and gone. Do you ever think about the fact that, I know my parents, I knew my grandparents, I'd heard of my great-grandparents, I'd heard a story or two about the generation before them, and I know nothing beyond that. It's just wild to think about how many of us there are, how many of us there have been, how many cultures have come and gone, and somehow this story remains. The Exodus tells the story of the journey from slavery in a land called Egypt. Pop quiz, do you know what the Hebrew word for Egypt means? Yeah, it means constriction. It tells the story of the journey from slavery in a land called constriction to the promised land. It's freedom. Last time we were on Exodus, we took a Easter detour. A few weeks back, in part 3 of the series, we talked about the tumultuous journey of Joseph, the flamboyantly dressed, good-natured golden boy who had a pretty wild life, lots of ups and downs. Went from favorite son to faceless slave to second in command of Pharaoh's courts to savior of the Hebrew people. And if you're curious about that was part 3, but we'll pick up the story right there, and I'm just going to read some scripture to us. All right. So Joseph died, and then a new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. "Look," he said to his people, "the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they'll become even more numerous, and if war breaks out, they'll join our enemies, fight against us, leave the country." So, you ever do this, You're just kind of looking around at life and you're like, things are pretty good right now. There's got to be a problem somewhere. Let me see here. Oh, this might be problematic later. There's that old expression, feed what you want to grow. The more attention you give to these things, the bigger they get. And then who's the guy that said, I faced a lot of hard times in my life and some of them actually happened? So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor, and they built Pithom and Ramses as store cities for Pharaoh. But check this out. You ever notice this phenomenon? But the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites. They worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter with harsh labor and brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. In all their harsh labor, the Egyptians worked them ruthlessly, and they just kept multiplying. So here's plan B. The king of Egypt ordered the midwives to kill every Hebrew boy during childbirth, but the midwives wouldn't do it. They came up with excuses, and so the Hebrews multiplied and became even more numerous. Then Pharaoh gave this order to everyone. Every Hebrew boy that's born you must throw into the Nile, but you can let the girls live. Next verse. Now, a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, seemingly throwaway verse. You ever read the Bible and you just think like, man, you only had a few hundred pages to tell us about ultimate reality. What's this doing in there? But what's it doing in there? What's the significance of that sentence? I'm talking about the birth of Moses here. If you read the Bible, you see that it's packed with these genealogies, and that's usually where most of us fall off of the Bible in 1 year plan, You get into the 3 chapters in a row of who begot who, and you're like, I forgot that I got something else to do. So here, this is the genealogy of the liberator of the Hebrew people. Some guy married some woman, and she became pregnant. It's just a normal guy. And she gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a beautiful boy, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, which is incredible. How did she fight? We could not have hidden our babies for 3 seconds, I don't think, when they were born. We would have gotten busted quick. They had the gift of tears. When she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him and coated it with tar and pitch, and then she placed the child in it and put it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile. Moses' sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. And then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and she saw the basket among the reeds and sent an attendant to go get it. She opened the basket, she saw the crying child, and she realized he was one of the Hebrew babies. She felt sorry for him. His sister asked her, shall I find a Hebrew woman to nurse the baby for you? Yes, go, she answered. So the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this baby and nurse him for me, and I'll pay you. It's a sweet deal. So the woman took the baby and nursed him. When the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses. Yes, Moses means to be drawn out of the water. And so Moses grew up in the courts of the Pharaoh. One day after Moses had grown up, he went out to where his people were, and he watched them at hard labor. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his own people. Looking this way and that, and seeing no one, he killed the Egyptian, and he hid him in the sand. The next day he went out and he saw 2 Hebrews fighting. He's kind of on a vigilante spree here. He asked the one in the wrong, why are you hitting your fellow Hebrew? And the man said, who made you our ruler and judge? Are you thinking of killing me like you killed the Egyptian? And then Moses was afraid, and he thought, oh gosh, they know what I did. News got to Pharaoh, and when Pharaoh heard of it, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh, and he went down to live in Midian, where he sat down by a well. He settled in this land. He took a job as a shepherd, started a family, and 40 years passed. What do you notice? Anything? Yeah, 40 years. Moses' life seems to be split in 40s. It's a symbolic number in the Bible. He was 40 when according to the tradition, he was 40 when he struck the Egyptian. He was 80 when God spoke to him out of the burning bush. He was 120 by the time he made it to the promised land, or almost. What stood out to me of all things was that he sat down by a well. Just picture that as an act of contemplation. And I suppose it doesn't require a poet to think about what the symbolism of a well might be, the deeps. He's reckoning with the consequences of his righteous actions. He's been exiled. He's found himself in a position of being loathed by both his biological and his adopted tribe. And here we find him, he's on the lam in Midian. You know what Midian means in Hebrew? Midian means to contend with. It can mean to contend with oneself. And as soon as he steps foot in Midian, he sits down by a well. And this is our introduction to Moses, one of the most significant figures in all of ancient literature. He's this archetype of the emancipator, or the savior, or maybe most accurately, the wounded healer. And our introduction to him concludes with him in this deconstructed state. He's contemplating his life at middle age. You ever wonder what your calling is? Have you ever found your calling? Remember that movie Juno? There's this line in Juno where somebody asks her dad about this. So the kid's like, I just don't know what I want to do with my life. I wish I had a calling. Is that a real thing? Do you have a calling? And the guy's like, yeah, heating and air. He's just passionate about his work. If we could all answer that way, we'd be a lot happier. I don't know. Have you logged time trying to find what you're made for? I spent a lot of time spraying lawns. I remember pushing this fertilizer spreader along this slanted hill right off of Beach Boulevard with a bunch of traffic, and I just kept thinking, everybody who has a grade school child that's driving by right now is saying, you need to pay attention in school because you're going to want to go to college, otherwise you're going to end up like this guy. Look at him struggling with that spreader over there, and I thought, this is not what I'm made for. I'm made for greatness. I remember in my early 20s having friends that were sitting around waiting for their calling and just kind of like watching Netflix until it came in. I also remember when this guy named Mike Townsend, who was a pastor here, who really kind of gave me a shot when Jess and I were just hanging out around this place for the first time. And he told me he felt like I had a calling on my life for this kind of thing. And I kind of agreed with him. I hadn't given it that much thought, but it seemed true when he said it. And he just kind of started opening doors for me, big, huge ones, like into the bathroom, so I could clean it. And into the receptionist's office so I could answer the phone. The lead pastor at the time was like, he's willing to be the receptionist? He had very clear gender ideas. So I don't think he'd ever heard of a male receptionist before. It kind of blew him away. But I remember something Mike said to me somewhere early on is like, listen, man, if there's any other kind of job you think you can do, go and do that. Like, you should really only do this if there's no other options. He said, you're going to be eating a lot of pancakes. That's what he told me. Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting thing, this calling thing, this purpose. It both imbues life with meaning, which feels great. And it's also a pretty heavy thing to be carrying around. And I don't know if everybody gets one, I'm not saying I have one. You look through history at the people who just seem like that's what they were here to do, Dr. King, Moses, Abraham Lincoln, these emancipators. And it all came with a pretty high cost. One of the tricky things about a calling is, assassination attempts notwithstanding, just one of the sort of internal wrinkles about living with a sense of purpose. And this can be any kind of calling, like to be a preacher guy, mother, politician, social worker. Is if we've identified a calling and a sense of purpose, what happens in the egoville and in our mind is, the mind gets kind of drunk off purpose, It's a pretty intoxicating feeling. And it's really easy for that feeling of purpose to become like an essential part of our experience of being a person. It sort of feels like this is what I'm called to really easily becomes this is who I am. And one of the defining features of identifying ourselves with our purpose is this dangerously overdeveloped sense of righteousness. Have you ever noticed how many angry people there are at peace rallies? Have you ever been to one of those things and you're like, I think I'm for this, but I don't know if something feels off about this. But also the world's kind of a mess, is it not? Like the anger is understandable. My friend Tracy, who is a man of social action, I've seen him move heaven and earth to help people in difficult circumstances. He'll push through when everybody else is given up, and he'll call the newspaper, and he'll burn every bridge, a 5-mile radius, if there's something that he knows needs to happen. And he tells me one of his favorite verses in Scripture is where it says that, like the night before, how Jesus ran the folks out of the temple, the money changers? That's sort of always maybe the cleanest example of like a righteous anger, that not all anger is bad or evil. Because Jesus seemed pretty angry. He also made a whip. It says he made a whip. That's Tracy's favorite verse. He says he just likes to picture Jesus the night before slowly braiding this whip that he's going to use to drive people out of the temple. And I thought, that fits. It takes all of us, man. Yeah, you see something and it's not meant to be this way. And I could turn a blind eye to it, or I can look at it, and if I look at it for long enough, I start to feel really angry at the perpetrators, at the universe, at God, at myself for not seeing it earlier, at any number of things. Like social action, the sense of righteousness, it's often accompanied by anger. And anger, here's the thing about anger, like we're already prone to oversimplifying complex things. We kind of need that function for survival, the amount of input that comes in all the time. We need these little semantic neighborhoods, bins and categories. I was fascinated the first time I read that we get the word category from the Greek kategoria, which translates directly to accusation. And, anger doesn't draw our attention to the nuances of the conversation. At least not for me. Anger clicks my mind straight into black and white thinking. In, out, good, bad, right, wrong. You don't understand. You don't understand. And any hope of maintaining objectivity and continuing to be able to hold on to the reality that like none of us see the complete picture. And you live long enough and you start to see it isn't as simple as I was told. There's no line between good and evil that separates these people from those ones, like, or makes that nation the bad guy. Man, I remember the first, oh gosh, let me tell you, this story is funny in hindsight. It was terrifying as it was happening. I was on a train in Bangkok, okay, and I was 20, and I had not ever left the United States of America, nor had I ever considered the effects that our government's foreign policy decisions were having on the rest of the world. Well, I was on a train by myself in Bangkok because I was on YWAM and they do stuff like that. They're like, you're 20, you've never been out of the country. Just hop on that train and swing on over to, wherever. So I'm on a train, I'm by myself, and there's this Irish guy next to me. And you could drink on this train, and he was doing so. And he had 6 or 7 Guinness cans scattered about his feet, and I was just like thinking, just don't make eye contact. And eventually he said, "Where are you from?" And I was like, "Well, the U.S., sir." And he said, "Oh, an American." And he's like, "What do you think about this decision and that?" He's asking me all this for, and I'm like, I kind of just stay out of it. The more, and he just keeps ordering Guinness and telling me about our record of atrocities that I had never looked at. And then I thought he was going to kill me, and I asked to move seats. And it'd be so nice if we were just the good guys, and they were the bad guys. You can get a lot of stuff done with that mentality in place. Do a lot of damage. Yeah, the tree in the garden was a knowledge of good and evil. The one tree, God said, eat of anything else, just avoid this one. If you eat that one, don't eat the other forbidden one, because that's eternal life. And you don't want to be stuck for eternity in a position of judgment, because always being right is exhausting and impossible. And if we pay attention to our own mind and all the snap judgments we're making all the time, the first couple times I tuned into that station, I thought I think I was happier before I knew that was happening, but also how much of my bandwidth is being used up by this. I wouldn't do that. Oh, I don't think I'd do that. They did what now? I'm not saying it out loud because I'm a man of the cloth. But inside, and it wasn't until I was in adulthood and I had the example of truly non-judgmental people that I realized how very judgmental I was. Hiding it or otherwise. Started hanging out with people that just never had a bad thing to say about anybody. It's like one of the greatest gifts you can get in an argument is when the person that you love and are arguing with won't argue with you anymore. They just sort of stand there and don't feed you back the same energy you're putting out, and then all of a sudden they stop being your adversary and they just become a mirror reflecting that you've gone full chimpanzee. You're like one stage away from Yeah, and it'd be nice if right and wrong was as clean as our minds want to make it, and as many of us grew up hearing it is. That's what Jesus said, though. He's like, you got enemies? All right, here's the plan. Love them. People are giving you a hard time and talking behind your back. Just pray for them. And in this way, you'll be like God. This is how God is. Because pay attention to how things work. God causes the sun to rise on ones we call evil and the ones we call good, and God sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. And this teaching suggests that if righteousness worked the way that we feel it ought to, like on a merit kind of thing, it'd just be really easy to tell who the good people and the bad people are, just by the amount of burden or blessing they seem to be carrying around. It doesn't work this way, does it? Yes, we can never see the whole picture entirely, but there is within us this little Pharaoh that thinks he can see the whole picture, that's never really doubted that knowledge, and who's constantly rendering judgment without equanimity. You know what the cure is for, you get this, right? It's not, have you ever been the object of judgment? I don't know, maybe somebody's made it this far without being judged. No? Now, Jess thinks you've all been the objects of judgment. Okay, all right, we agree. How did that make you feel? Like an object. Yeah. A discarded object of scorn. And we all agree that we'd rather be people than objects, right? You ever notice how exhausting it is to execute judgment as well? Like, first of all, it's almost impossible to follow through on whatever it is that you've decided needs to be happening here. No matter how much I judge this person, I can't get them to change their behaviors. I know I'll double down on the judgment, maybe mix in a little rage. Crap, that didn't work, and now we hate each other. Yeah, judgment, man. It doesn't feel good to receive, and it doesn't feel really good to offer. You know what the remedy for judgment is? Curiosity. Which is a really helpful thing to remember the next time we're in an argument, that the cure, the antidote, remedy for judgment is curiosity. Like just truly asking why. Trying to understand for the sake of understanding. You know, there's that, who's the guy that made the 7 habits of really good people, or what's it called? Highly effective people. You know, one of those things is like, seek first to understand, then be understood. Remedy for judgment is curiosity. There's a pretty famous verse, you're probably familiar with it. It's told in the Gospel of Thomas in a slightly expanded way. Jesus is attributed as saying that this is the process of searching. He goes, look, it's like this. If you're searching, don't stop until you find, which may be another way to say, it's maybe better not to look, but if you've already started looking, see it through to the finish. If you're searching, you must not stop until you find. When you find, however, you'll become troubled. Your confusion will give way to wonder. In wonder, you'll reign over all things, and your sovereignty will be your rest. It ends in rest. So, the remedy or the antidote to curiosity or wonder would be righteousness, which produces a sense of self-righteousness, which produces these unexamined thoughts that have already concluded that situations are a certain way, have overlaid reality with our set of expectations, and then life just becomes like a series of self-fulfilling prophecies. You ever done that? You ever driven into a conversation and known exactly how it was going to go and rehearsed all your lines and stuff, and every now and then you get it right, and it goes just that way? I remember somewhere along the way, I thought, I wonder if this conversation's going exactly like this because I decided that's the way it's going to go, and then I'm like answering. Have you ever had the occurrence? Okay, here. Let me give you a better example. Have you ever been in an argument with somebody that you love and trust, and then you said, I can't believe you said that, and they said, I didn't say that? And you're like, yeah, you did. And they're like, no, I said this. And then you're at the impasse. Do I trust or do I Google, am I being gaslit? I've had this happen where I just knew the conversation was going to go a certain way, and it didn't even go that way, and I made it go that way. So the remedy is curiosity. It's like, have you ever gotten so far into an argument, disagreement, that you're like, the facts start piling up, and you're like, oh crap, I might have been wrong. But you're already in too deep to admit that, you know? I'm too invested in this position. It's too big to fail. This. What's it? Stop digging. She said her mom takes the George Costanza approach, which is, it's not a lie if you believe it. The power of belief. Wow. This is Albert Einstein. He wrote, and I verified this. You know how almost every quote on the internet is attributed to Albert Einstein? You're like, I don't think he said that, but he did say this. The most beautiful thing we can experience as human beings is the mysterious. It's the birthplace of all art, science, creativity. To experience the mysterious and to approach it with curiosity, and also with the knowledge that some things can't be understood in the way like a murder mystery. There's no. Some things have no solution. Some things are not reducible or solvable. Some things like Some mysteries are just infinitely explorable. And at some point in life, usually maybe after life's worn us down enough, we realize that we'd rather be free than be right. I'd rather be free than be right. And freedom's a strange thing, you know. I think this is an interesting picture and an accurate picture of freedom that we get in Moses, who was once a man of privilege. He's now broke and alone. He was once filled with holy purpose. Now he's exiled and reviled. And one time he was sure of his righteousness. He's not really sure about anything anymore. Once he was filled with ideas of the future, but those ideas didn't pan out the way he thought they would. And maybe here, sitting in a land called to contend with oneself, next to a well, he experienced a mind that had come to rest and how it feels to be present, and how it feels to be empty enough and to be filled with something new, not something. That's a funny thing, I guess, about the image of being filled, I feel like, is helpful to picture it like a spring. It comes bubbling up from deep within us, not from outside somewhere. This is the next slide and the next part of Moses' life. Now Moses was tending to the flock of Jethro, great name, his father-in-law, who was the priest of Midian. And Moses led the flock to the far side of the wilderness, and he came to Horeb, which is the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it didn't burn up. So Moses thought, I'm going to go over there and see this strange sight. Why isn't that bush burning up? This is such an interesting verse. When the Lord saw that Moses had gone over to look, so God sees that Moses sees, God called to him from within the bush. He said, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here am I. There's two Hebrew words that are rendered, like here I am or here am I. And this is really interesting, this one that's used here. One of the Hebrew words denotes location and the other denotes presence, and there's a difference. There's a way in Hebrew to say, I'm right here, and it just means like I'm in this general vicinity. But internally, I could really be anywhere. And then there's this one, Hinanai, which just means present, listening, looking. It means to pay attention. My first pass through this verse, I thought, I wonder how many burning bushes there have been in my life. And I noticed that the bush was burning, and I thought, that's a fire hazard. If the insurance company finds out about this, I better move quick, and I douse it with water and go back to watching the playoffs. Earth's crammed with heaven and every bush ablaze with God, but only those who see take off their shoes. The rest are happy eating the blackberries. I'm going to close with this little poem. We'll get into this conversation between God and Moses next week. It's pretty interesting. This is Mary Oliver. She wrote, my work, what I do for a living, my work is loving the world. Here the sunflowers, there the hummingbird, equal seekers of sweetness. Here the quickening east, there the blue plums. Here the clam deep in the speckled sand. Are my boots old? Is my coat torn? Am I no longer young and still half perfect? Let me keep my mind on what matters, which is my work, which is mostly standing still and learning to be astonished. The Phoebe, the delphinium, the sheep in the pasture, and the pasture, which is mostly rejoicing, since all the ingredients are here, which is gratitude. To be given a mind and a heart in these body clothes, a mouth with which to give shouts of joy to the moth and the wren, to the sleepy dug-up clam, telling them all, over and over, how it is that we live forever. Right here, right now, grateful, curious, open. Willing to make peace with all that can't be known. Armed with the courage to let go of the things that aren't working anymore, even if they're precious. Brave enough to hope for a future we could never know for sure. But present. Yeah, I guess Al, if you want to come up, we can sing some tunes together. We can sit and reflect. Somebody sent me a note last week, and I appreciated it. They said, that was a good service. I feel like at the end it would have been really nice to give people a chance to talk with somebody else or to receive prayer if they want that. And I thought, I think you're right. So if you find yourself in a place where it'd be nice to process some things out loud or to be prayed for, and you just make your way, I don't know, I'm going to probably send them towards you, Pam. I hope that's all right. That section looks empty. See that empty section over there? There's no chairs? That's why it's empty? It's the standing desk section.
Are we doing the cardboard confessional?
That's for yeah, we need a confessional. Go to the no chair section over there because it's still the easiest place to see it, and then we'll figure out some seating arrangements. All right. But you can use this time however you would like, and you're also free to exit if you'd like. But we got a good 20 minutes here before this bad boy is officially wrapped up. So we'll open the Eucharist here. Elements will be available to anybody who'd like to come and receive. And just use this time how you best see fit, and I'll let us know when it's 11:30. It's all yours, boys.